Hello everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Sean's Movie Crusades. My name is Sean Wascrew, and I'm here to review all the latest films in theaters, as well as any that you guys recommend, whether they be something that's come out recently or old school films. Today, we are going to be reviewing the newest Transformers film, Bumblebee. But before we get to that, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, so that way you guys are kept up to date with all the latest movie reviews and anything else I decide to put up on the channel. And also head on over to Facebook and go ahead and find Sean's Movie Crusades on there and give that a follow. That way you can keep up to date on there as well. Now, today's review, as I said earlier, is going to be about the new Transformers movie, Bumblebee. Me, myself, was a huge Transformers fan. And I'm talking about the old cartoon series, from the 80s. Loved everything about it. The original cartoon movie, Transformers movie, still to this day, when Optimus Prime dies in the first part of the film, like literally in like the first 10-15 minutes, still is heartbreaking to this day. It's like that for a lot of people. I mean, it was a beautifully well done cartoon, had a ton of heart to it. And like I said, to this day, grown men and women who love the cartoon series still cry when they see the Optimus Prime death in the movie. So fast forward to 11 years ago, when Michael Bay was going to be taking the helm of the Transformers films to a live action movie, I was ecstatic. I was a big fan of Michael Bay at the time. I mean, I love the Bad Boys films. And like all of his other films, I don't want to say Pearl Harbor because I was kind of wish-washy on that. But I like the style of his films, mainly the Bad Boys films, and I'm excited for the third Bad Boys film when it comes out because I love Will Smith and Martin Lawrence together. But when I saw that he was going to do a live-action Transformers film, I was real excited. And then they casted Shia LaBeouf and Megan Fox, and I loved mainly Shia LaBeouf because I watched him on Disney's Even Stevens. And, Megan Fox is just a very, very attractive woman. So I was very excited for that film. It came out. It was solid for the most part. I actually really enjoyed the first film up to a point. Mainly up until they brought the whole government into the film. I feel like we were telling a very beautiful story between a boy and his car. Or a boy and his dog, basically, in a sense. With Shia LaBeouf's character, Sam Witwicky, and Bumblebee, and then you introduced, Optimus Prime and Megatron and all the rest of the Autobots and Decepticons, and it was great to see them, even though they didn't look like the original cartoon series. But obviously things change, technology changes. They want them to look shiny and new and all this stuff, and then they brought in the government into the film, and that's when you started to see a turn for the worse for the film itself, because then it started to become, not that it wasn't already in the film itself, but a lot more toilet humor, adolescent humor is what I kind of like to call it, and it just kind of went downhill. And then we had 4 more sequels of basically the same kind of garbage. Transformers 2 was utter trash, whether it was the racist robots or the, I'm blanking on the big robot that turned into everything, having balls, and and then Robot Heaven, and how the hell Shia LaBeouf, who's a human, actually made it to Robot Heaven. And then you had the third film, which actually was not bad. I didn't personally hate the third film that much, but it just started to get winded, because the crappy part about the Michael Bay movies, I didn't even watch. Dark Side of the Moon with Mark Wahlberg was just one of the biggest pieces of shit films. And I don't know how you fuck up the Dinobots, but that movie managed to do it. And I could never forgive Michael Bay at that point. I refused to watch Last Night, that came out last year, because of just how poorly these films have been put together by Michael Bay. So when I heard about Bumblebee, that they were going to do a Bumblebee movie, it was going to be before all the other Transformers movies, I was like, okay, whatever. It's still going to be the same old garbage that we've been getting for the past 11 years from Michael Bay. And then they announced that Michael Bay was not going to be doing the directing of this Transformers movies. He would be producing, but he would not be directing. And I was like, alright, well, we'll still see what happens. So they announced the director would be Travis Knight, and the only thing I really know Travis Knight from is that he directed Kobo and the Two Strings. And I thought that movie was fantastic. Anyone who hasn't seen that film should really go out of their way to see Kobo and the Two Strings, because it was a great movie. So now you've piqued my interest a little bit more, because now you have a director that I actually enjoyed the one film I saw him do, but I was still worried because Michael Bay was still a part of this, and I still felt that Michael Bay was going to take this young director and just kind of push him around to still making basically another Michael Bay movie. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle films, for example. That's a whole other situation that I don't really want to get into, but that to me, that was another one of those where he knew people were going to be upset if he was going to direct the Turtles movies, so he hired some young directors, and then he basically pushed them around to still make his movie, and they were utter garbage as well. That's a whole other story. Then I saw that Steven Spielberg was going to produce this as well, and I figured maybe he'd be a good counterbalance to Bay. So, still was kind of on the fence about it, but then we got the first trailer of Bumblebee around Comic-Con, and right away, it felt like an entirely different film. Because, you know why? The Transformers look like Transformers. They actually look like the cartoon. Soundwave actually opens up his chest like a tape deck, and Ravage comes shooting out. The Panther. I was blown away by that. Optimus Prime actually looks like Optimus Prime from the cartoons, and not that garbage heap of a piece of crap that he looked like in the Michael Bay films. Yes, Bumblebee can't really look like Bumblebee from the cartoon, because, I mean, he had a legitimate actual face. So this Bumblebee still looks mostly like the Michael Bay Bumblebee, but he's more polished and more clean and easier on the eyes, like the cartoon. So it was kind of a marriage between the Michael Bay Bumblebee and the cartoon Bumblebee, but everything looked better. And I actually got generally excited to see this film. Plus, then they casted Haley Steinfeld, who I am a huge fan of. I've loved her since her debut film, True Grit. She was one of my favorite performances 2 years ago in last year actually, in Edge of 17. I think she should have been nominated for Best Actress for that. So when I saw that she was going to be a part of this, I'm like, okay, now we actually have a really good actress to counterplay with the Bumblebee character. And then they got in John Cena as well, who, I mean, he's no Rock, but he's growing as an actor, and he actually has been a highlight in a lot of films that he's actually been in. He's got great comedic timing, but he has not found that one film that has basically risen him up to, to elite actor status like The Rock has. So I felt like this could be a nice introduction for him as well. Not an introduction, but something that he could sink his teeth into and jump into it as well. The movie itself, it has a lot of, and you can tell Steven Spielberg is an executive producer of this, because it has a lot of similarities to another Spielberg film, E.T. It's very much like the first Transformers film to a point, where it is instead of a boy in his car, it's a girl and her car, but it's done very well. It also has similarities of Iron Giant, and it does have that 80s feel, because this movie does take place in 1987. So you have a lot of throwback with music, you have a lot of throwback with the style of clothing, the cars, the posters, the movie posters on the wall, in the bedrooms, and the style of clothing, and all that stuff. So very, very Spielberg-esque with the 80s films, and you could really see Spielberg in the direction of Travis Knight, and not a ton of Michael Bay, which is huge. The general plot of Bumblebee, and it's in the none of this is spoiler, because a lot of this is in the trailers, so you can pretty much understand what the plot of the movie is through trailers. The beginning of the movie, first off, the first 10 minutes of this film is utterly fantastic for Transformers fans. The movie literally opens up with the Battle of Cybertron, and I was geeking the hell out during this whole sequence. We were actually seeing Cybertron legitimately, and it looked like the Cybertron from the cartoons. You're seeing Optimus and Bumblebee fighting alongside the other Autobots, and you see them, the Decepticons fighting along. We don't see Megatron or Starscream or any of the big callers. The biggest one would probably be Soundwave that we actually saw in that sequence. But basically, Cybertron's fallen, the Autobots are losing the battle, And so Optimus is basically getting all of his Autobots in escape pods to basically branch out and spread out, and then they would eventually, meet back up. And he sends Bumblebee on an important mission to Earth, because he says it's a planet that the Decepticons don't know about. Go there, protect Earth, and basically make sure everything's okay, and then contact me, and I'll bring all the Autobots there. And so he sends Bumblebee off, and then Bumblebee crashes to Earth, where he runs into John Cena and his army crew, and from there, he's immediately attacked by humans. Bumblebee is. So doesn't really have the first best impression with the human race as soon as he gets there, but he was followed as well. So Bumblebee did not travel alone, as he was followed by Cliffjumper, who's a Decepticon. And in the trailers, a lot of people thought Cliffjumper was Starscream, which he wasn't. But because he's another Decepticon that turns into an airplane, and so they have it out in a huge battle, and of course a lot of humans die in this battle. And in this battle, we actually see how Bumblebee loses his voice. If you guys remember the first Transformers film, Bumblebee can't talk unless he uses basically lyrics from music from his radio station, or his actual radio in his car. So in the first 10 minutes of the film, we actually hear Bumblebee's first actual voice. He's actually voiced by Dylan O'Brien from Teen Wolf and the Maze Runner franchise. So it was actually nice to hear Bumblebee legitimately for the first time. But in this battle at the beginning of the film, he loses his actual voice and his memory as well. And so that's kind of where we basically get to the point where he basically needs to go into hiding. He gets severely hurt in the battle with Wheeljumper, and he basically needs to hide. And so he takes the identity of a Volkswagen Bug and basically hides in a junkyard. And then that's the introduction to Haley Steinfeld's character Charlie. And basically with her character, it's the day before her 18th birthday, and she's going through a rough time. She lost her father previously. I would say it's been at least about a year or two probably since that happened, but she's clearly not gotten over it. Her mother has a new, I'm assuming it's her husband. I don't think I ever really noticed if they were married or if they were just living together, but she's got a new guy, and her younger brother, the whole family has adapted around the new stepfather, Ron. But Charlie's character, the character of Charlie, or Haley Steinfeld's character, she hasn't accepted it. She was really, really close to her father, and because of that, she's kind of become closed off. She doesn't really hang out with her family. She kind of just hangs out in the garage building her car that her and her father were trying to build, because she doesn't have a car. And it's kind of her form of therapy, but because of that, she's very closed off. She's very much a loner, in a sense. I mean, she has a job, but she doesn't talk to anybody. She just kind of keeps to herself, and she's a moody teenager to a point, but it's mostly because of the loss of her father, and she just hasn't gotten over it. The character of Charlie is very tomboyish to a point. She was a star athlete. She was a high jumper for diving. But she loves building cars. So she goes down to a wreck like this marina, and she scavenges through parts of boats, and that's where she finds Bumblebee. And so she gets Bumblebee as a car, and that's where the story basically entails. John Cena is out trying to find this Bumblebee, because obviously he blames Bumblebee for all the humans he killed when he first arrived at Earth. And then as that process is all happening, two Decepticons come down to Earth. The Decepticons are, let me find their names real quick, Shatter and Dropkick, voiced by Angela Bassett and Justin Theroux. Great voice casting, by the way, between those two. And they get stopped by John Cena and the government, and instead of basically attacking them and killing them like Decepticons would, they basically chalk up this whole story that Bumblebee is basically a terrorist and a traitor, and that we need to capture him because he'll attack Earth if we don't. So they flip the script on the humans, and now it becomes the government and the Decepticons hunting for Bumblebee. And then from there, you have the rest of the movie, which I'm not going to go any further than that. All that stuff I just said, I know it sounds very spoiler heavy. That's literally in the trailers. So anyone who's seen the trailers, I basically just kind of went over it, long version. But yeah, that's the general plot of the film without going too far into it. But like I said, the first 10 minutes from Cybertron to Bumblebee's first appearance at Earth is incredible, and it's got some great action sequences. And then from there, it slows down tremendously. So I mean, and I mean that in a good way. So a lot of people who were actually fans of Michael Bay's Transformers films, I don't know how many other people there are. I mean, it does make a ton of money, so there are a lot of fans of it. But if you're a fan of Michael Bay, you may not like Bumblebee because there's not a ton of action in the film. You have action in the beginning, and you have action at the end, and in the middle, they're telling a great story between a woman and her car, or like like I said, it has the similarities of E.T., Iron Giant, where they're building this relationship between Charlie and Bumblebee. It has a ton of heart, this film. Haley Steinfeld crushes her role as Charlie. The ability for her to develop so much emotion in her lines, basically by herself, because let's face it, it's not like they built a Bumblebee and put that Bumblebee next to Haley and had her talk to it. She's basically talking to a tennis ball, in a sense, when she's doing these scenes, and she's crushing these scenes with Bumblebee, where you can kind of tell with a lot of movies with CGI characters that the real actors, you can tell they're not really looking that straight at the CGI characters, or you feel that their performance is not fully connecting with the CGI character, and that's because they have to kind of pretend that CGI character is there. Haley Steinfeld, throughout the whole film, you feel that the actual Bumblebee is right next to her the entire time. The way she emotes emotion to Bumblebee, talks to Bumblebee, and how Bumblebee reacts back and forth together is beautiful, to the point where she does such a great job to make you think that Bumblebee is literally in the same room with her the entire time. Her story of heartbreak and trying to make herself better and get that closure from losing her father, and using Bumblebee in that sense is a beautiful story. It's, like I said, a lot like E.T. in a sense. And it's incredibly well done, and it's easily my favorite part of the film. There's hijinks in the film. There's some slapstick comedy to a point, but the big difference between the comedy in this film and the comedy in Michael Bay is that Michael Bay's jokes are usually very crude, or result in characters doing really, really stupid things, to the point where it's just eye-rollingly bad, or the dialogue is incredibly poorly written, to the point where it's like, you went out of your way to make a bad joke, and you might think it's funny, but it's not funny to any of us. The actual jokes in this film land very well, and they come off naturally and not forced. There's one particular scene, which I'm sure a lot of the kids and most people are going to enjoy. It wasn't a fan of mine, and it's in the trailer, and it's when Bumblebee actually goes into the actual physical house of Haley Steinfeld, and he's just stumbling around everywhere like an idiot, destroying everything in the house. And I could have done without that, because the Bumblebee character is a lot smarter than that, and it was clearly there for laughs, and besides it just destroying everything, nothing really came out of that scene. I expected something more to come out of that scene, but nothing really did, so that's a scene they literally could have taken out of the film, and I felt like it would have been better, or the outcome of that scene leading to certain points of the films, they could have gone about it a different way, and it probably would have been a lot more crisper, in a sense. But the overall story arc between these two, from the beginning that they meet to the end of the film, is incredibly well done. And even when the action scenes are happening in the film, they're very, very smooth. Unlike Bay's Transformers films, it's just a bunch of jumbled metal clanking together. And then heaven forbid it's not Bumblebee or Optimus Prime in the fight. You have no idea who's hitting who, who's fighting who. It just looks like a bunch of metal basically banging together like this. In this film, first off, there's only basically, once you're on Earth, there's only like 4 total Transformers on Earth in this movie, and they're distinctive. Bumblebee's yellow. What were the names of the other ones? Wheeljack. I think I called him Wheelhanger earlier. Cliff Jumper. Cliff Jumper is white and red. Blitzwig is blue. Dropkick is blue. Shatter is red, and they're distinctly bright red, blues, and yellows, to the point when they actually fight, you can see who is who in the fight. There's still metal things fighting each other, but they're very easily seen, and you can see who's hitting who, and the beauty of the fighting style in the movie as well is incredible. One fight, Bumblebee is fighting someone, and I'm not going to say who it is for spoiler reasons, and it feels like a wrestling match out of WWE. Bumblebee is the smaller robot, so he's doing some lucha libre kind of fighting. There's a lot of, and anyone who watches wrestling will know, I mean, arm drags, head scissors, hurricane ranas. Bumblebee's doing legitimate small man wrestling against a bigger opponent, and the bigger opponent's lumbering around like a bigger guy would against a smaller person in a pro wrestling match, and it was very distinctive and it was awesome. Whereas another fight with Bumblebee and somebody else, it was very MMA, where it was very much ground and pound and grappling and just this distinctive fighting styles that we never saw in the other Transformers films, which made the fighting that much better, that much crisper, and that much enjoyable overall. John Cena, he's fine in the film. He's basically playing the typical, CIA, FBI, Army guy. He's very by the numbers for his role, but he does have some of the best lines in the movie. He has one particular line that literally everyone in the audience is thinking, and he delivers it to perfection. But I wish they would have given more to his character, but it wasn't his movie. He's definitely a side character, I get that, but for John Cena, I wish they would have given him just a little bit more to do, but he was fine for what he did. He didn't blow us away with anything huge, but in the small parts that he was in, he did a very admirable job. The negatives of the film itself, for a lot of people, it's going to probably be not nearly as much action as the previous Transformers film, so if you really want a very action-driven film, you're probably going to be disappointed, because like I said, it's at the end, it's at the beginning, and it's at the end, and then you have a great built-up story in between with very little action. So, you might not be a big fan of that overall. The other thing is the government still is the weak link of the film, just like in the previous Transformers movies, especially the first film, right when the government or Sector 7 came into play, the movie clearly went downhill after that. The movie does not go downhill in this one when Sector 7 does show up, but they are definitely the weakest parts of the film. And like most of the Transformers movies, the government is just completely and utterly stupid in this movie. There's things that they do and the way they go about things that, I'm sorry, are just the dumbest mindsets possible. There's no real world thought process going through these that you would think that the government would ever do these certain things. And what's funny is that John Cena, like I said, speaking through the audience, he sees this and he calls them out on it the entire time. And so you have one guy who's literally telling you how stupid you guys are being, and then everyone just keeps going by doing the same stupid thing. So the government still is the weakest part of the film. None of them are fleshed out at all as characters except for John Cena's character. And then there's another sequence in the film where there's some mean girls, and they're basically thrown in. I mean, there's nothing to their characters at all. They're basically thrown in to be mean to the Charlie characters for us to feel more sympathy for her. But that's not needed, because we already feel plenty of sympathy for the Charlie character, because Haley Steinfeld does such a fantastic performance as Charlie that we didn't need these mean girls to show up and just be bitches for no reason. I mean, I guess it was just more or less to kind of build the throughout story between Charlie and Bumblebee, and I forgot to mention him earlier. He actually does a really good job as well. The character of Memo, he's played by Jorge Lindenborg Jr. I'm sorry if I said that name wrong. He does a really good job as well. He's basically the nerdy boy who has a crush on Charlie, even though he doesn't look like a nerd by any means, but he's told to act like a nerd, kind of like how Shia LaBeouf is supposed to be a nerd in the first film, but he's clearly not. He does a real good job, and he plays off really well against Charlie and Bumblebee also. But yeah, the only negatives I really have in terms of the film is, like I said, the government scenes were very weak. The mean girls were not needed at all for the plot of the story. Bumblebee bumbling around the house, like I said, was just thrown in for comedic laughs that just didn't work for me. Not as much action, but the action that's in there is top notch, and I loved every bit of the action that was in there. Could there have been more? Sure, but I'm not upset that I'm not upset with the action scenes we got. They were some of the best Transformers action scenes we've had in any film, and I think anyone who watches it will enjoy it. And like I said, the fighting styles between the different fights, every fight in this film felt like a different type of film. Like, whereas with the Transformers movies of Michael Bay, every fighting sequence felt the same. They felt long, winded, and like I said, metal, clacking metal. There was no substance, no differentials in the actual fights, where in this one, every fight felt like a different style, felt like a different battle, in a sense, and it was very well done overall. So, the other big question. A lot of people were asking, because this takes place in the 80s, is this a prequel or is this a reboot to the Transformers franchise? And the answer, I don't have a clear-cut answer to that. Initially, going into the film, and basically all the way up to the end, I was going to go with the mindset that this is definitely a prequel that is leading into the first Transformers film from 2007. But at the very end of the movie, they tack on a scene that clearly shows that it is not a prequel to the original Transformers franchise, because we did hear after last night doing so poorly that they were scrapping the franchise and they were going to start all over again. But they announced that after they were already making Bumblebee, so I didn't know if Bumblebee was going to be the start of the new franchise, or if it was just going to be one last-ditch effort to the old franchise. Now, the way they did this, I really, really hope that they are using this as the starting off point to the new franchise, and that this is the first film of that franchise, and then they are going to continue with Travis Knight as the director, and this Bumblebee character, and even Haley Steinfeld's character, and John Cena's characters. I hope that we get more of this kind of film for the Transformers franchise, because if you actually had started from this one in the first place, the Transformers series would not have been as bad as it has become. I felt like this would have been a beautiful starting point to the original series. Even if they had gone into Shia LaBeouf's story after that, I felt like it definitely would have been a lot easier for the fans to fall in love with the franchise, because this movie would have been a beautiful starting point. But if we are going to use this as the first film of the new reboot, it is a perfect introduction for people who are not fans of Transformers or who hated the Michael Bay trilogy. And I cannot wait to see if they're going to continue the next films based off of this movie. And if they do, I think it's a great job. And I hope Travis Knight stays in charge of the directing, and that they keep Michael Bay, even though he is producing the films with Spielberg, as far away as possible from these movies. Because if this movie is anything like the future ones that are coming out, Transformers is going to start becoming one of the best franchises on the market. And let's face it, as a true fan of the Transformers franchise from the old days, I could not be more happier to see a Transformers movie that I generally loved, and I think most audiences are going to love it too, especially with it being out Christmas time. It's a great family film to take your family to. There's plenty of movies that are out right now with Bumblebee, Aquaman. You're going to have Watson and Holmes, even though I think that looks horrible. There's a ton of movies out. Wreck-It Ralph. This is definitely one I highly, highly recommend going and seeing for a family. Children are going to love it. Adults are going to love it. They're going to love the 80s throwback. And I think it's, like I said, it's a fantastic starting point to this hopefully new reboot to the franchise. And I could not recommend this movie enough. So that's been my overall thoughts of the film. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. If you did, go ahead and give this review a like. Go ahead and share this review with your Transformers fans, or people who might be on the fence of this new Bumblebee film, and maybe they'll change their mind and go out and see it. And like I said, the money for this movie, if this does well, I hope this eventually spawns off to more films. But most importantly, don't forget to hit that subscribe button on the video, so that way you guys are kept up to date with all the latest movie reviews. I'm going to go see Aquaman on Christmas Day, and then hopefully have that review out that night, if not the next morning. So keep a lookout for that. I got a few more movies I got to check out still for this year, so that way I can do the best of list. I also got another video coming out that's going to be the top disappointing films of the year, most surprising films of the year, and then of course at the beginning of the year I will be releasing a long video, if not all these videos are not long because I like to ramble, a long video of the most anticipated films of 2019, and there are a lot of them. So keep on the lookout for that. Go ahead, like I said, hit that subscribe button so you guys are up to date. And until I see you again, Movie Crusaders, good morning, good afternoon, and good night.